You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. Between 2 and 6% of people have hoarding disorder, yet very few of us talk about it. Learn about the condition from me, somebody who has it, as well as academics, therapists and other experts I interview. Find out how to support the podcast at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. Finally, I am not a doctor, I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. So I am here with the inimitable Dr Jan Eppingstall, a counsellor in Melbourne, Australia, who specialises in working with people who hoard. Jan, how are you?
Indubitably, I'm well.
I'm glad to hear it. So today we are talking about towards moves and away moves, which sounds like an odd couple of phrases, but is actually a really useful concept when we're trying to deal with something like hoarding disorder. It's something I'm convinced we've referenced in passing before, not necessarily using those words, but today we're really going to dig into it. So Jan, I know this is part of ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Can we start with you giving a quick overview of what towards moves and away moves are?
Yes. So in a nutshell, this concept is used to kind of illustrate that there are two main options we have in any given situation. We can move towards what matters to us, or we can move away from what matters to us. It's like a way to clarify. We can ask ourselves, what do I do that keeps me where I am, and what can I do to take me where I want to be? So it's a really great visual aid for people in session.
It made me think of an idea I tried to focus on of kind of, will this action take me even like one step closer to where I'm wanting to be? Even if it doesn't feel significant, is it in the right direction?
Exactly. And there's a book around that idea of making sure that you ask those questions about all the things you're doing in your job in particular. Is this one step going to take me towards the goal? But it's the same scenario, isn't it? Is it going to take me towards it or away? It's quite nice and clear in terms of helping you.
It is really clarifying, isn't it, as a question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you give some examples of towards and away moves in a hoarding or a dehoarding context?
Well, towards and away moves depend on our values, which I will bang on about a bit later. But let's say I value connection, so engage fully in whatever I'm doing and be present with others. Maybe authenticity is another one that's important to me, to be authentic, genuine, real, and true to myself with others, and generosity, to be sharing, giving to myself and others. So away moves in hoarding could look like keeping craft supplies just in case of a crafting emergency, or going out every day, all day, to avoid the chaos, perhaps keeping, my living environment a secret from my loved ones. Towards moves in hoarding might look like packing up craft kits for the local community centre, acknowledging that the home environment is out of control by being fully present at home and actually seeing what's in front of me, and perhaps telling a trusted loved one of my struggles and opening up about how I'm really feeling about my home environment. So it's all dependent on what the person holds as their core values, which determines whether it's a towards or away move.
And as you referenced, values is one of your favourite things. so here is your opportunity to fill your boots. How do values come into this idea of towards and away moves?
I'm so glad you asked about values. This is my chance to bang on. No, they are integral to this idea of choice points and towards and away moves. So here, when we look at the choice point concept, we're talking about moving towards and away from the things that are most meaningful for us. So this is about consciously investigating what's most important to us and show up for ourselves and others in tangible ways through our actions. So freely picking and pursuing our life direction is extremely important because this provides us with kind of this inexhaustible supply of motivation. But it's very easy to get carried away with the pursuit of life kind of centered around superficial gratification and materialism, because this is kind of the way that society measures success: money, power, fame. Thinking that more things will lead to a satisfying life has kind of led us all here to anxiety, depression, negative self-assessment, low life satisfaction, and hoarding behaviours. So the idea here is within ACT that one of the first things that we do with clients is kind of try to establish what brings them meaning in their lives in order to give them direction in the way they act. Pardon the pun.
And just as I am happy to let you talk about values, I'm also always happy to give you an opportunity to talk about things like cognitive fusion. So can you explain what that is in a way that sounds less like something you'd get in a pretentious restaurant?
Nice. Yeah, someone did ask me is that like Asian fusion? But cognitive fusion is this, it can kind of be explained in a few ways to sort of give you the taste of it. So it's believing that thoughts are facts when they might be inaccurate or not helpful. They might be accurate, but are they helpful is a really important distinction in ACT.
Accurate but not helpful is every thought I'm having. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, they can be, but they certainly can be accurate. But then when you really dig in, is that helping me thinking or saying those things to myself or believing them about others? The other thing is allowing thoughts to dictate our actions and choices rather than our values. And it's when we become so tightly bound to our thoughts that they kind of begin to define our reality. And that, again, is really quite poignant in the area of hoarding, I think, that being so bound to the thoughts that what we're thinking is capital T true, it is quite, I see it quite often with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked before in a number of episodes, it seems to be relevant all the time, about flexibility versus rigidity and perfectionism. How do they link in with this towards and away moves thing?
Okay, so if we're more psychologically inflexible, we might believe that living according to our freely chosen values might not fit with what's expected of us, what we should want in life. So if we were free to choose how we lived our lives, we might decide, we want to be an artist, but we think we should find a stable, high-paying job. I mean, this happened to me, and I felt empty and eventually disgusted by the pointlessness of my job. When we follow what's kind of expected of us within society, it makes it more difficult, to work out what a towards and what an away move might be. It's a sense of emptiness and a lack of fulfillment in our lives. So we try a bunch of things and nothing seems to satisfy our yearning for belonging and wholeness. And I just pulled out Steve Hayes. He's the originator of acceptance and commitment therapy. He wrote a book called A Liberated Mind, which I highly recommend. I even had a signed bookmark that he sent me. But there was a quote in this book: in your pain, you find your values. And in your avoidance, you find your values' disconnection. Without emotional flexibility and openness, it's impossible to live according to chosen values. And I was like, in your pain, you find your values. It's like, that really makes me think. And I've been thinking about it all week. That really resonated with me. I don't know quite what it means to me yet, but I'm going to dig in.
It's so interesting when that happens. I had a similar thing. A friend said something to me last week, and I was like, I don't exactly know why that's resonating, but there's something in it. And still resentfully journaling, I eventually worked it out.
I love that it's now called resentfully journaling. Oh, gosh. Gosh. Good on you. Oh. No, yes, resentfully journaling, at least it includes journaling.
I'm resentfully journaling and then resentful when it helps.
Yes, isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? I don't know if I told you that I met a young lady, and she said, I asked her, what helped for you with therapy? What were the things that you pulled out of it? She said, well, I learnt to do everything that my therapist recommends. Do everything that they suggest, because chances are it will work. And I feel that about your resentful journaling.
At some point, I'll say thank you.
Yeah.
So sometimes something can feel like a towards move. It feels like it's taking us towards where we want to be. But ultimately, over time, or even immediately sometimes, we come to realize it's actually an away move. I think for me, one of the classic ones is buying storage items. If this shelving unit will be what I need to sort my house out. And then, oh, this is more clutter. How common is that we think we're doing the right thing, but actually we're not?
This actually happens a lot with certain clients like those who hoard, because they might see moves as towards, but the therapist might see those as self-defeating, and therefore like they actually are away moves. Like, things that people will say to me sometimes, I just need more room.
Yeah.
That's that's what will solve the problem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to investigate more room. As you said, if you could just organize it better in storage containers, that, seems like a towards move. But, this is something that needs to really be compassionately and respectfully challenged by the therapist once the values clarification process progresses, because you don't want that judgment around whether it's a towards or away when you're attempting to develop those values with your client. I do think this happens when we try to problem solve our emotions. So instead of kind of digging into the deep underlying stuff of why all the possessions accumulated and continue to accumulate, we try to kind of problem solve the issue with more stuff.
Stop talking directly about me, Jan.
Oh my God. Piercing eyes looking at you. We think it's going to fix the problem.
I can't cope.
But it just makes it worse, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just clutter. It's just years of pushing down and pushing aside what matters most to you in favour of, unfortunately, ineffective substitutes. And that takes time to come to terms with. But time will bring you around to that realisation.
And can I say, as somebody in that period of coming to terms with, incredibly difficult. It's difficult to come to terms with, as well as taking a while. Because if you've been trying to logic your way out of it for a long time, there's quite a protective reason for that.
Exactly. Oh, completely.
And so doing it differently means taking away what feels like something protective and ultimately kind of isn't, but it feels like it is and it always has been. And so removing that is hard and scary.
Yeah. And it feels like it works because it's sort of an activity that you do. Because that's how you deal with other problems. It's just problem solve them. Hey, that'll work. But it just doesn't work with your emotions. If only it did.
I often think that if we've got behaviours or things we're doing that are problematic or are causing problems, a good first step is just recognising them, even if it takes us a while to address them. I think that sometimes for me, spending a while just spotting it when it happens, even if I don't do things any differently, can be really helpful. Is that the case with towards and away moves as well?
Exactly. The idea is if we bring awareness to a difficult situation that we're experiencing, like a cluttered home or a life of disorganized overwhelm, and we recognize the things that hook us and dominate our behavior and then pull us off track, then we can actually pivot towards the kind of values and leading principles that guide us and motivate us as we move through life. So just recognizing it is enough. Initially, if we can do that, I mean, we're already on the road towards then making that choice of a towards or away, even if it's just recognizing that that might be something we need to address. Often we just go through life without recognizing those things. So it's an excellent first step.
And in my experience, what starts as just recognizing something, over time, when I recognize it, it starts to create some friction with that recognition that wasn't there at first. But over time, I recognize it, and there's something more uncomfortable about the recognition.
Yes, yes.
And that's when I'm more likely to try and do things differently because that friction is growing.
Is that like for you, is that like that cognitive dissonance of I'm doing this,
Yeah.
but it's actually creating a problem, and then there, as you say, it becomes sort of problematic, and there's a friction there. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And then because it's increasingly causing just a frisson of discomfort, I'm a lot more motivated to, okay, maybe I actually need to do this a bit differently.
That's really interesting.
Does any of this, I'm going to guess yes, link up to our favourite neurotransmitter, dopamine?
Look, this was really interesting because I was listening to a podcast episode on Scott Barry Kaufman's show, aptly named The Psychology Podcast. He was talking with an addiction expert, Dr. Anne Lembeck, and she said something that they were talking about something that made me think. She was saying that dopamine is both pleasure and motivation. So it's both liking and wanting. And then Scott commented that dopamine can make us run for things that are no longer serving our growth, or maybe never even served our growth, because there is a difference in pleasure and meaning, right? And I just went, pennies dropped. It just caught my attention and made me think about those approach and avoidance behaviors. You know, in ACT, we're looking at narrow, rigid, inflexible behaviors. So these can be inflexible behaviors that are kind of under aversive control. So a motivation to avoid or escape something we don't want. So we're perhaps avoiding discarding due to fear and anxiety. But inflexible behaviors can be under appetitive control. So motivated by trying to get something you do want. So perhaps buying all the stuff because it lifts your mood. Scott's comment about pleasure and the avoidance of pain, which is recognized in the brain in the same way as pleasure, and meaning was kind of thought-provoking to me. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that. I just thought it was kind of like that. It's that whole short-term gain, short-term.
Yeah, no, completely. Now you've said it, I can see that there could be something in it. I'm kind of trying to process my own experiences of it, and do they feel the same, or does it feel like a similar pull? And it's definitely something I'm going to have to sit with, but I think there could definitely be something in it.
Yeah, because it's like that whole so pleasure right now, but living according to your values is a much bigger concept.
Yes,
isn't it? It involves that idea of hope that I will be able to live in this way. I will be able to do these things. Whereas pleasure is right moment. Like this moment, I'm going to feel happy either by avoiding something that is aversive, or moving towards something that I really want. But it's about stepping back from that, instant gratification to kind of look at where I actually want to go. Because we often live in that space.
Yeah, of course.
Of just what do I need right this minute?
Yeah.
quick get it, and then move on to the next thing, and then realize at the end of the day that I'm not actually happy.
And part of that, or I would say a big part of that, is just the way modern life is set up. It's incredibly hard to exist in this world and not be forced into that position where it's all about how can I fit my lunch into 20 minutes because I've got more work to do, or how, it's really hard to have the space for an awful lot of people to even sit and think, what is important to me, or what do I actually want?
Completely. And it's I mean, I see myself, I feel like I'm, dissociating. I see myself sitting there scrolling
Yeah.
because I feel uncomfortable sometimes with my thoughts.
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable not filling the time with something. And that is definitely something that modern life, social media, consumerism, materialism, we have to fill our time with either entertainment or with stuff.
I've been making a concerted effort recently to spend at least some of my day with no either music or podcast on in the background. I'm still getting on with things, I'm still doing things, but in silence. And
Yes.
it's uncomfortable that that's a space my brain can fill.
Mm.
And I don't necessarily want it to do that. But also, it feels important that I am capable of spending some time in silence.
Mm. Mm.
That feels like a life skill that I've lost over the years and shouldn't be this hard.
It shouldn't be, should it? It feels like I used to do this all the time. What happened to me? And I swear it is, it is big billionaires who are making billions of dollars off our attention.
My word for this year is intentional.
Mm.
And I am trying to say, like, my current favorite social media place is Instagram.
Mm.
It's where I'm finding genuine pleasure some days.
Mm.
But I am trying to make it a positive, intentional choice to open Instagram and actually enjoy it rather than scroll, 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 scroll. I don't know what I've seen. I just need to block out the world. And same with, like, if I'm trying to work and my brain is wandering and I'm going to procrastinate, I'm trying to just make a positive choice to, okay, I'm doing something else for 20 minutes, because if not, I still don't get done what I was originally trying to do, but I hate myself a lot less at the end of it, because that extra layer, that I have got less work done, but that extra layer of, and you are terrible and useless and you can't even is a lot quieter if I have said, okay, I'm closing the laptop and I'm going to stand in the fresh air for 10 minutes, rather than if I'd closed the laptop and stood in the fresh air for 10 minutes, hating myself for it.
That's so, like, that is exactly the towards. It's there, the towards in a way. Like, the towards is you reaching for Instagram in order to see what's good in the world, or see something that might make you smile, or might make you think of a friend or whatever. So that's a towards move. But when you are scrolling, that's an away move. So it's just completely spot on. That's exactly what was pointed out with Russ Harris, because we haven't mentioned Russ Harris, have we, or did we?
We haven't named him. I can tell you that his work has informed an awful lot of this episode, so we probably should.
Yeah, Russ is great. Aussie MD and therapist. I've done a number of Russ's courses in the past, and really find him extremely accessible. He's just got a really nice style. I like the way he kind of describes things.
Yeah, I was introduced to this topic by a short YouTube video that I will link to in the show notes
Mm,
that just made me think, oh, this is super relevant to various aspects of my life. And then I read more.
mm.
And that was when I suggested the topic to you because it seemed like an obvious thing. But yeah, the style in his YouTube video was very accessible. He explained things clearly.
Yeah, I really love him. He's excellent. He does
He
really
your
good work.
boyfriend.
He's my boyfriend. He's written a number of really good books, but The Happiness Trap is the classic. And he's also written a number of other ones like The Reality Slap, which is interesting, and The Relationship Gap, I think, is the other one. He's written numerous books. And they're easily accessible as well. Like he's written with his Happiness Trap book, he's created one that's kind of sort of almost comic book style. So it's mostly pictures, and my husband's got it next to the bed. So, he occasionally opens it up and has a bit of a read of act
In bed.
related in bed. Yes, it's highly romantic.
That's our 24 years of marriage still.
What do you think about experiential avoidance, darling? uh,
Hoarding darlings are a special group of listeners who go the extra mile to support the podcast. They get an extra written post every month with links, answers to extra questions from guests, recommendations, and Hoarding playlist. You can become a Hoarding darling and help to support the future of the podcast, as well as getting this monthly blog post at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. So we mentioned that sometimes we can recognise that we're doing behaviours that may not be helpful or may not be aligned with what we truly want to be doing. And so when we recognise either that we are tempted to make an away move or when we feel ourselves doing it right now, what can we do to try and turn that ship around?
you said it. When we recognize that we're heading towards an away move, we're at that choice point. We see ourselves doing it. We might catch ourselves before or just after, but we noticed it. So then we can create an if-then plan. So if I find myself ordering more craft supplies, then I'll leave it in my virtual cart and review it later. Or if I hear myself saying, I'll keep that just in case, then I'll ask, in case of what? What could it be? A craft emergency? Maybe, maybe not. Even if we do complete the away move, we can accept it and move forward and know that, hey, that happened. I recognize that that's a step towards where I want to be. Next time, if I hear myself saying that, then I will do this action, which is a towards move.
Something I have been trying, if I do an away move, if I get home and I've bought some nonsense in the shop or something like that, is I make myself kind of sit with it as neutrally as I can and look at, okay, did that give me what I was hoping it would give me? How do I feel now that I've done it? And those kinds of things. And then what has worked surprisingly well a few times, and I'm thinking specifically of the magic middle aisle in Aldi and Lidl.
Kryptonite.
I know, I have been at the magic middle aisle and something looks irresistible. And what I've been doing is I take myself back to those reflections and go, okay, last time I came home with a toolkit from the magic middle aisle, I've got to really remember how that felt afterwards. And nearly always it didn't feel good. And being able to transport myself to that initial, not judgy look at how I felt, just, okay, really assess this as neutrally as you can.
Mm.
it really helps me to then resist it, because I go, oh yeah, this is that thing where in the moment it feels like a great idea, but afterwards I feel like a hangover.
Mm. And so many people, so many people won't return things. Like they just will
Hmm.
not go through the shame
Yeah,
of
yeah.
returning something, because then they get the questions asked, well, why do you want to return? There's always that question, and you're like, because I
Because
made a
I bought
mistake.
it on a compulsion.
I bought it on a compulsion, and sometimes you just need someone to go with you. Like I have lots of clients who have a support person
Yeah.
who's willing and able to go with them to return those things. So it gives them an out, so that if they do make a mistake, they can always go back and return it. But also it gives them that sense of, oh yeah, but then I'll have to go back with Sally, and she's going to have to take me through that process and get it reversed, and you start to really think it through then. But if you buy it, bring it home, it ends up, in left in the plastic bag with a knot on the top, thrown on the pile of other items you bought from I like your name for it, the magic middle aisle. Love it. Oh my God, I'm going to use that now. Yeah, like that. There's repercussions, or there's other things that have to occur, don't they? Whereas if you just throw it on the pile, that's a future Jan problem, and that's a different person to you. Future Jan, she's different.
Yeah, what's
So,
that got to do with me?
so now Jan, she's a different human.
And I feel like it's important to say at this point that we can go in with the best plans and strategies, and sometimes we will do away moves regardless. And even if you've heard this episode and you feel like you're equipped, doing the odd away move is human and forgivable, and not something to use as a stick to beat yourself with.
Yeah. And also to stop you from making a choice, because that's still a choice. That's the other thing, is like, oh, is this going to make people think, is it an away or a toward move? Oh, I won't make a decision. But even not making the decision is going to be one or the other.
So Russ Harris, who we mentioned a few minutes ago, talks about helpers when he's talking about towards and away moves. What are these?
Okay, so Russ is talking about things like goal setting, values clarification, diffusion or unhooking skills. I kind of like the idea of unhooking, because it's when that thought hooks you and pulls you away, and other executive function skills. So many of these things like goal setting and executive function can be difficult for a lot of people who might be listening, especially those with kind of attentional deficits. So you might need some help with planning, organising and scheduling. Even though he says they're helpers, I'm just thinking about who we're talking to today. So finding a therapist who can help you with that is important, because these will help you move towards what brings meaning in your life. You might just need a little bit of assistance with that executive function stuff. So don't think that there's no support out there. There's people who can help.
When I was researching this topic, it made me think of an idea we've talked about before from James Clear. This idea that of the actions we take being a vote for the person we want to be. Do you feel like towards and away moves are connected to that idea?
Yes, I just think this is a really lovely way to help us clarify what's important to us and how we want to show up in the world. I really like this as kind of a shortcut for us to check in at the moment of choice or at the choice point. I just love it. I just think that is this a vote for the person I want to be? Even if we ponder it and we still go straight through and make that choice, we have stopped and we have considered it, and then we've moved through with the choice. I love that. I love it. And I love that from James Clear, the vote for the person we want to be. Just genius.
When I was a idealistic teenager, rather than a jaded woman in her 40s,
Yes.
I was I spent a long while. I boycotted so many things. I will not buy from this company or that company or the other company. I still quietly boycott some places, but not with the venom with which I did as a 19-year-old. But one thing that the way somebody put that at the time was that you've got a pound coin in your hand and you can either spend it at this place or this place, and think of that pound as a vote for or against that company or that product or that kind of thing. And I found that a really helpful way to frame it at the time. And I think that's probably why when I first heard James Clear say that about, yeah, a vote for the person we want to be, it really clicked in that same, oh, that's a concept I'm familiar with and that has made sense to me for a long time.
Exactly. And it makes sense within what you've just described there, a vote towards a company you want to support. It's the same concept about you. You know, you deserve the votes. You deserve, for the votes to be taking you in the direction of who you want to be.
So, what first steps can somebody take if they are listening and they want to take more towards moves today?
Okay, we'll start working on clarifying your values. This is what's going to offer you the direction in life and give it meaning. It can take time to work out, and we were talking about this before we started recording. It can take time to kind of work out what is really important to you. And when I first did this exercise a long, long time ago, many of my values were things I thought I should value, like orderliness, patience, safety, like those types of things. And when I really dug deeper, those were not on the list. They didn't make the top 5. So ask yourself these questions. What matters to you? What gets you fired up? What inspires or infuriates you? What makes you happy, sad, angry? What do you enjoy? What floats your boat? When do you feel grateful or appreciative? And for what? Who do you care about and who do you like to hang out with? Those are the questions that are going to kind of have this internal discussion with yourself, and maybe resentfully journal about that.
And then resentfully acknowledge that it was helpful.
Yes.
It is extra question time. You know the score. Number between. This is the bit where I ask guests an extra question. It's sometimes a slightly silly one. And Hoarding darlings get access to this extra question and the answer. If you would like to become a Hoarding darling, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. So, anyone who listened to the outtakes after the end credits in Jan's last episode will know that I hit my limit. And the final question that I have asked guests again and again and again suddenly became unbearable to me, and I cannot ask it ever again. So, I don't think it's a coincidence that there are more outtakes in Jan episodes than
Why is that?
I just have no idea. But as a new final question, Jan, if there is one place on the internet people can go to check you out, where is that one and only place you're going to tell us about?
Instagram. I don't really go anywhere else. At @stuff_ology. So if you want to DM me there, just go for it. I love it.
Marvellous.
That's the only place I really look. Excellent question.
So much better than the list. The relentless list.
Ugh.
Anyway, Jan Eppingstall, thank you as always for another excellent insight into this weird brain thing.
You're quite welcome. May we take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record and listen to this podcast today. I am speaking on the lands of the Boon Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their connection to country, both land and sea, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
It's the bit where that hoarder shouts out someone wise.
Shout out this week to James Clear on the Chase Jarvis Live podcast, which I will link to in the show notes at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. And I wanted to include this little clip because it expands on the point that Jan and I mentioned about James Clear in the episode. Have a listen.
I think the real reason that habits matter is that they can reshape your identity. They can reshape your sense of self or give you a different narrative to tell yourself. And it's hard for habits to stick if you change the behavior but don't change the underlying identity, if you don't change the way that you look at yourself. And so ultimately, what I think this comes down to, if I'm just trying to get to the punchline, every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And so, no, writing one sentence does not finish the novel, but it does cast a vote for I'm a writer. And no, doing one push-up does not transform your body, but it does cast a vote for I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. And the more that you repeat little habits, the more that you start to build up votes, you build up evidence of being that kind of person. And, if you do it one or two or three times, maybe it doesn't mean a whole lot. But if you keep doing it, eventually you build up enough votes that kind of the weight of the scales shifts and you start to actually think, yeah, maybe that is the kind of person that I am. And ultimately, true behavior change is really identity change. Like the goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to do a silent meditation retreat. It's to become a meditator. And once you start to assign those identities to yourself and look at yourself in that way, you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person that you see yourself to be. And so I think if you really want to get a habit to stick, my suggestion is to start with what I call an identity-based habit, to start by saying, okay, who is the type of person I want to become? And then which habits reinforce that identity and focus there, rather than worrying too much about the result early on.
Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast.
Indubitably, I'm well.
I'm glad to hear it.
I had to say it. I couldn't stop it from coming.
I think the first outtake being less than 60 seconds in is a good start. It's a good sign
start.
for this recording.
It's a good start. That's something my son used to say when he was like 10. Everything was indubitably.
That's gorgeous.
I met a young lady. She wasn't that young. She was a little bit older than me.
You're going to say she wasn't a lady.
She wasn't a lady. No, she was. She was a gorgeous woman. And she said,
feels like it's something that's taking us to where we want to be. Try that again.
And I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that.
I wasn't expecting to be asked for thoughts. I am a wreck. So when Sorry, there was something else I was going to say. See if it's stuck around. No. So when we speak in a sentence, that would help.
Sentences are overrated.
Okay, put words in an order that makes sense. Let's go with that.
It's happening.
So Russ Harris, who we mentioned a few weeks ago. So Russ Harris, who we mentioned a few minutes ago,